My name is Nestor Vargas, and I help Latinos create wealth. More on that is really I specialize in people who are 5 years away from retirement. So we're going through this transition in life, right? And so I want to share my content lanes with you guys. And please, feedback is a gift. Feel free to just give it to me. I don't need like this sandwich method of like, oh, this looks great, but just give it to me. Like, we're all big enough here. All right, let's see. Let me share my screen. All right. You guys see this?
Yeah.
All right. I don't even know how to make this bigger.
Wow.
You guys good?
Now you're good.
Yeah. All right, perfect. So I talked about emotions. Emotions are really big in a transitionary period, especially when you're going away. You're going from having this identity of working and being that person, that being a big part of your identity, to now being, going into retirement and just really having to retool your identity. So I really wanted to work on emotions as one of the content lanes, so dealing with change, how to create a new life that brings meaning to you, choosing your estate planning people as well. So, who's going to be the person that's going to take care of your health should you not be able to really act on your behalf on your own. Traveling in retirement, people want to travel. So I wanted to bring like some travel agents that specialize in kind of this, you guys see this, like the cruises on the river, like this super nice cruises, stuff like that. And then really mental and physical health and how it impacts the finances. So that's one lane I wanted, was emotions. The other ones, Pablo, I think, you haven't worked with your dentist, financial advisor. It probably seems very similar, like taxes, investing, and then just not really talking about the regular capital market, stocks or bonds, but really bringing people on, like, really teaching people everything else there is to know about investing, real estate, insurance products. I call it sexy investments like crypto and NFTs, really learning more about that. And so those are the content lanes there, creating income and then insurance. I don't know. What do you guys think?
All right. So Nestor, I see, when I look at this, I think that you're going to be great for like the first year, and then you're going to start running out of topics.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because everything here is about, let's talk about money. And like most of this stuff has, so you have a little bit different. So emotions, I think emotions is interesting. I would say if somebody doesn't say, oh, I'm here to talk about money, you're going to have a really hard time attracting anybody, anybody into caring about money that doesn't already care about money, right? So when we talk about our idea for content lanes, we talk about this idea of casting a wide net that attracts people that are in the periphery of the conversation and then engineering it in, right? So this looks a lot like, so my Finance for Physicians, right? Daniel Wren Financial, the financial advisor for doctors. He started his podcast year one, talked about similar stuff like this, like nonstop, and then eventually started having to spread out just to open it up a little bit, right? So when I think of your content lanes, and I think of like, does this interest me? Do I trust you? And is this for me? Right? You said a couple of key things about your clientele, that they're Hispanic, that they are 4 to 5 years from retirement, right? I don't see that really reflected in anything here that would make me opt into like, oh, this is for me because I'm in this part of my life, right? So
I was going to say that too.
Of course you were.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, is the content all in Spanish or is it in English?
Right now it's all in English. We're going to be doing one episode in Spanish. So I already have a podcast. But yeah, working with my coach, he's challenging me to do something in Spanish. So we're gonna.
The reason why I ask is because if it's not in Spanish, I would almost want to change the emotions pillar to a cultural one. Like, what are the common cultural norms or not norms that are like discussed around money or finance or family?
Nestor, I would tell you that culture pillar is the emotions pillar, right? Like cultural, like kind of like cultural things that Hispanic immigrant first generation families tend to deal with that are emotional, right? Like navigating kind of like that, the idea of just like my son is way too American for me and my parents are too Hispanic for me. The idea of creating, right? Like that thing is a very universal thing that would give great tools. I can tell you, man, Latino, like Latino immigrants definitely have a thing about money, right? Like that, money dynamics within all of that. So to me, that emotions pillar can be, traditional Hispanic culture, emotions, like dealing in a new society kind of thing, and like how that changes. I think that's real good. I would encourage you to consolidate some of this stuff into your just smart money strategy. Like it could be, like you are an expert in this, so this could be infinite kind of like content for you. You can talk about it a lot, but looking at it from that standpoint, I would also, given that period of that time that they're in, right? Like think about adding something that has to do with their stage in life. If they're 5 years from retirement, I'm assuming that they're like early to mid 60s, something like that, right? So extending life, right? Like quality of life going into like, right? Like health and that type of stuff, I think is another big, like, quality of life in your third stage, right? Like I think is a whole pillar for you. Like that to me is a whole, like, is this interesting to me, right? So like this idea of like, how do I deal with a younger generation, which to me is this cultural emotions piece. The idea of like, how do I extend my quality of life is a whole, like those two are very, is this interesting to me, right? Like if I'm 60 something and they're telling me like, man, you're having a hard time getting your grandkids to speak Spanish, like here's a podcast for you, I'm gonna listen, right? Or hey, like you're starting to wonder whether or not should you turn vegetarian? Like what will that do to you or whatever, right? Like, even though that's kind of a dirty word in my family,
Yeah, man, it's hard.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah, it's hard, right? So think of those pillars as is this interest to me? This has a lot of like, trust me.
Yeah.
And you can definitely expand the financial conversation within all of those conversations, and you can have shows about each of these things as well. I'm just, I think if you are strategic about having some stuff in those other like wider net content pillars, you're going to start to be able to like expand the conversation and bring in a little bit more of an audience.
Yeah, no, I love that. I guess one thing that I failed to say is that it's not just going to be me talking, right? We're going to be interviewing other Latinos who are experts in this topics as well. And I think that is going to bring an audience that is Latino and will make it interesting.
So Nestor, in that regard, that's another reason why I like having the wide pillars of the, is this interesting to me, right? Because we did it for Ren specifically so we can get him on Dr. Burnout shows, right? Because if you can go into like the Familia Latina podcast and be the money expert, but you need to have a reason to have the Familia Latina podcast on your show, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the idea of how you can, what are the other things that you can go into that you can guest and be the only money guy there, but it still fits into your content pillars, is another reason why that this is interesting, needs to be a little bit wider in order to like continue that organic ecosystem that you're going to create.
So see, that's interesting, because I felt like the emotions, maybe a title is just not appropriate, but like creating a new life, you bring a psychologist to really talk about how to do all this stuff. I feel like that's a wider net than the IQ stuff. That is, it's easy for a financial advisor to always go this route because that's the way our brains work, right? It's always very analytical. All right, so
you're right. The emotions thing is your wider lane, right?
Like, I like the culture. I like the culture stuff. I really need to do more work on that. But
if I can jump in here real quick, just
please,
to sort of piggyback off of like the emotions and the culture stuff, a lot of the things that I'm hearing too is like what's motivating your audience, right? To engage and consume with your content. And of course, like as Latinos, like we kind of had that morbid level where we're always preparing for like the last chapter, right? So we want to prepare everything so we can hand it down. But I think this might help in terms of like sort of reframing the conversation as well, to not look at it so much of like preparing for the finality of things, but also like beginning a new chapter. So how can I create other avenues for myself to provide that sort of guidance, to hand it down, pass the baton to the next generation? If we're talking about creating generational wealth, then we should be talking also about how do we educate the younger generation in how to have that financial discernment, and then creating that wisdom, so that way we're not just, leaving everything that we've worked for to them to, and then without a map. So let's do that as well.
I also would like to make sure that in your content pillars, you're giving opportunities for storytelling from your life, Nestor, like as a professional, things that you've experienced. That kind of fits into the category of, do I trust you? So like if someone wants to be able to trust you and hear what you're saying, also you're mentioning there are other people on your content too. So I mean, a group story, whatever. There needs to be like 1 or 2 clear lanes that directly speaks to what you do in your business, and stories that help provide, explain, and validate those experiences to convey that you are an ethical source for people to view and consume content from.
All right, so it's kind of case studies. I'll call it case studies in my mind. It's just really walking people through some of the things that I've experienced with other individuals whom I have helped, how that's actually benefited their journey. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, you can almost and Pablo, you can help further this, but I just think of financial success stories and financial fails as a easy medium to get started and convey some of these things, because I would agree with Pablo, some of them are a little too specific. Like we want to get specific, but not to the point where we have an episode title essentially in one of the boxes.
Correct. These are show names, right? Like these are less categories and show names that you have inside the box, while the things up top are more like categories that could be inside of a lane.
Repeat that one more time, Pablo.
So I think Rita brought up a good point, right? Like we want, the pillars are categories, and the things underneath the pillars are subcategories, not necessarily specific show names, right? Like, and when I look at your things underneath the lanes, they're basically show names, right? Like, except for the emotions one. The emotions lane is really a much more of is really more in line with that. And that to me is just like a naming thing. I would just add the cultural piece of it. But yeah, and to Rita's point, I think these stories, I don't know if I would make that a lane by itself, but I would definitely use that as shows that highlight these stories and make sure that you're hitting on kind of like the things inside of these like squares.
Interesting. All right. This is good
Yeah,
stuff.
let those boxes be the conversational starters and not necessarily that one specific episode topic that you're going to sit down and have that conversation with somebody on. Because if you do that, then you're going to kind of almost prevent yourself creatively and have way too many columns and way too many boxes, and it won't be like a map. It'll be more so like a set list almost, if you will.
I love this. Love this.